Well, last Wednesday we took the whole class and we talked about one city. What was the name of that town? Capernaum. And what is that known for? Well, yeah, it was Jesus' town, his city is what it was called. Was he from Capernaum? No. Where was he born? Bethlehem. Where was he reared? Then why in the world is it called his city? He spent a lot of time there, didn't he? And he did a lot of things. We talked about how that more miracles were performed in that area than anywhere else. More of his teachings in that area than anywhere else. Yet how did they receive Jesus? Did they take him like the Nazarites did and try to throw him over a cliff? It's not what they did. What did they do? Just kind of indifferent, weren't they? And that's a sad thing, as we made the point last week. All of that evidence, and they just didn't care. They just didn't care. Right. And I know there's some kind of joke that goes around there. Oh, the church, biggest problem today is apathy, and nobody just seems to care. Or I don't care, or something. I can't remember what the joke was, but it was a joke with a point. Apathy is a dangerous thing, isn't it? We don't have to be strong and adamantly against something that is good. We just have to do nothing with it, right? Well, let's go ahead, and we're going to be talking about the healing of the demonic, and that was in the synagogue. Let's see how well you were listening last week. Who financed the synagogue in Capernaum? I hear whispering. Somebody be bold enough to say it. Who was it? Centurion did. He loved their people, and he's the one that financed that. And so Jesus is there. Let's read both of these passages. It won't take too long as we look about the healing of the demonic. Turn with me to Matthew chapter 1. Matthew chapter 1. Mark 1. Listen to what I mean, not what I say. Mark 1. Let me get down here and see. There it is. Somebody was making fun of me for that last week, and I hate to say it, but they might be right. Mark chapter 1. Start with verse 21 and follow along as I read it. Then they went into Capernaum, and immediately on the Sabbath he entered the synagogue and taught, and they were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority and not as one of the scribes. Now there was a man in their synagogue with an unclean spirit, and he cried out, saying, "Let us alone. What have we to do with you, Jesus of Nazareth? Did you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." But Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be quiet and come out of him." And when the unclean spirit had convulsed him and cried out with a loud voice, he came out of him. Then they were all amazed, so that they questioned among themselves, saying, "What is this? What new doctrine is this? For with authority he commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him." And then let's turn over to the book of Luke, chapter 4. So keep in mind the things that are revealed there, and then let's see what Luke tells us about the same account. Luke chapter 4, starting with verse 31. Then he went down to Capernaum, a city of Galilee, and was teaching them on the Sabbaths. And they were astonished at his teaching, for his word was with authority. Now in the synagogue there was a man who had a spirit of an unclean demon, and he cried out with a loud voice, saying, "Let us alone. What have we to do with you, Jesus of Nazareth? Did you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." But Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be quiet and come out of him." And when the demon had thrown him in the midst, it came out of him and did not hurt him. And they were all amazed and spoke among themselves, saying, "What a word this is! For with authority and power he commands the unclean spirits, and they come out." And the report about him went out into every place in the surrounding region. We're not going to spend much time on this great miracle because there's other things that we're going to talk about tonight. But when we come to this passage, I want us to notice, first of all, that he spoke, did Jesus, with authority. And that's what they were amazed about. He spoke with authority. They were astonished not only at what he taught, but the way that he taught. And I'm not talking necessarily about his position. We talked about a few weeks ago being seated and standing and all of that. Listen to what Brother Burton Kaufman said about this. His teaching was not patterned after the method of the Pharisees. He did not bow down before the traditions of the elders, but spoke the truth of God's word regardless of the prejudices of the people. We know that he was the master teacher. You can just tell that by looking at the things that he taught and the way that he taught it. But think about what Kaufman brings out here. He spoke the truth of God's word regardless of the prejudices of the people. Have you ever been in a situation where you were going to teach something or say something or stand for something where you knew that many of the people in the audience were not going to agree with you? And sometimes you may say, well, you know, it's kind of fun to make people mad. I'm going to say it and I'm going to let them. That's not why he was doing it. But he did not allow the prejudices of the people of the day. Can we preach with authority today? If so, how? What do? We preach the Word. And do we worry about the culture where we're preaching? Do we worry about, how are people going to feel about this? What are they going to think? What are they going to say? If we come too hard on a Bible teaching, we might drive some away. Or do we just teach the Word in love? Do we just teach the Word and let the people worry about how they're going to respond to it? Well, that's what we do. That's right. They can teach the truth. That's it. Right. And you think about the courage it takes in places that are still very much pagan. Hinduism is the majority. And you think about what it would take to stand up there as a Christian in a place like that and teach and preach the Word of God. Courage, isn't it? Well, here Jesus comes into the synagogue, supposed to be his own people, and he's going to teach them things, but he's not going to allow their prejudices to stop them. What did they think about Gentiles? What did they think about Samaritans? What did Jesus think about Gentiles? He loved them. What did he think about Samaritans? What did he think about a Samaritan woman that was of ill repute? We've already talked about her, haven't we? He's not going to let their prejudices stop him from teaching what needs to be taught. And so let's notice some things about this demon-possessed man. And again, I got a quote from Brother Waycaster. He's got a commentary that's going to be coming out, hopefully this year, the first part of the Gospel of Luke. And he made some good points about this man. Sometimes people will say, well, people who were possessed by demons were actually epilepsy or some other type of malady. It was just maybe a mental illness, and that's really what it was. There was no such thing as demon possession. But let's notice a couple things about this man, and then we're going to move on. In this teaching, he went down to Capernaum, city of Galilee, verse 31, that's still in Luke chapter 4. In the synagogue, there was a man who had a spirit of an unclean demon, and he cried out with a loud voice. So this man was able to go into the synagogue, which seems to suggest that the demon would attack him at different times, would possess him, and would cause him to do things at a certain time and maybe let up. Brother Waycaster, this is the quote I had from him. The demon had a personality, possessing even the ability to speak. Demons often expressed intelligence. They knew of Jesus, and in some instances, they even knew things about the eternal realm. The cures were so effective that immediately following the casting out of the demons, those possessed were again in control of their mental faculties. They were able to think just like they were right before, the demon possessed them in the first place. And so the cure was so quick and so sure that they were able to go on talking and, had their smarts back with them and had complete control of them and were able to even talk to Jesus. We've even seen some men that after they had the demons thrown out of them, they were desiring to follow Jesus, and who wouldn't? But look what the demon-possessed man says. The demon says, "You are the Holy One of God." He spoke from the terror of the punishment that was going to await him, and he was bitter against Jesus. You can just see it in his words. Perhaps even he was trying to incite the crowd to get them to go against Jesus. Why do you think Jesus stopped him from speaking the truth? Now think about this. Have you ever thought about this? Did this demon speak truth? I know who you are, the Holy One of God. Why did Jesus tell him to hush up? If he was speaking the truth, his time hadn't come yet. That's a good idea. Bad association. What do you mean? Exactly right. That's what Brother Waycaster said. If he hadn't stopped him, if he hadn't rebuked him and stopped his words, and you would have an evil one speaking of the deity of Jesus. When Peter said it, what did Jesus say to him? "Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah." But to the demon who says the same thing in words, what does he say? Be quiet. He didn't want an evil one talking about Jesus and his character. I'm trying to just think of an evil person, but I don't really want to go that route. If somebody was just really, really evil and came up to me and said, "Boy, I know this Mark." He puts his arm around me and said, "You guys listen to this guy. He knows what he's talking about. He's been there for..." What would you think about old Mark then? That might make you question some things. However, if a good, honest person says the thing about Jesus, well, then, of course, it's a whole different story. You don't want a demon speaking on your behalf. Okay, let's go on to the next part. I know that was quick, but we've got to go through some of these relatively quickly. This is one of my favorites. Have you heard me say that before? This time I mean it. Look at Matthew. That is Matthew, isn't it? Chapter 8. This is the healing of Peter's mother-in-law. That's right. Look at Matthew chapter 8. Let's read verses 14 through 17. I know you might tire of reading each account. Well, I know you don't really do that. But there's some just different little details that come out from each one that I want us to get the whole picture. Matthew chapter 8. Look at verse 14. So this is after the healing of the man casting out of the demon. Look at verse 14. "Now when Jesus had come into Peter's house, he saw his wife's mother lying sick with a fever. So he touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she arose and served them. When evening had come, they brought to him many who were demon-possessed, and he cast out the spirits with a word, and healed all who were sick, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet." Now that's really good. That's beautiful, but let's go on to the next one. Look at Mark chapter 1 now. Mark chapter 1. That tells us something, but let's go a little bit deeper. Mark 1 verse 29. "Now as soon as they had come out of the synagogue, they entered to the house of Simon." So it gives us a little bit more detail. They leave the synagogue, they go into Simon Peter's house. "The house of Simon and Andrew with James and John." Now just put that right there in your memory bank, because that's where we're going to probably spend most of our time this evening. So they go into Simon Peter's house, Simon's house. Who else is there? Andrew and James and John. All right. That's right. But Simon's wife's mother lay sick with a fever, and they told him about her at once. So he came and took her by the hand and lifted her up, and immediately the fever left her, and she served them. Now, go back to verse 30. You see a little bit more urgency in this. He comes into the house as soon as he leaves the synagogue, And what do they tell him? As soon as he gets there, verse 30. And they told him about her at once. Are they concerned? Took her by the hand, lifted her up, and immediately the fever left her, and she served them. At evening, when the sun had set, they brought to him all who were sick and those who were demon-possessed. Verse 33, and the whole city was gathered together at the door. Then he healed many who were sick with various diseases and cast out many demons, and he did not allow the demons to speak. Why? Because they knew him. Now let's go over to Luke chapter 4. I love Mark's account there. Let's go over to Luke chapter 4. Let's start with verse 38 now. Luke chapter 4, verse 38. Now he arose from the synagogue and entered Simon's house, but Simon's wife's mother was sick with a high fever, and they made request of him concerning her. So he stood over her, and this tells us a little bit, and rebuked the fever, and it left her, and immediately she arose and served them. When the sun was setting, all those who had any that were sick with various diseases brought them to him, and he laid his hands on every one of them and healed them. And demons also came out of many, crying out and saying, You are the Christ, the Son of God. And he, rebuking them, did not allow them to speak, for they knew that he was the Christ. So we have something else here, don't we? A little bit more detail. He rebukes the fever. Like he rebuked the demons, he rebukes the fever. He has control, doesn't he? He has control. Now, here's what I want to talk about tonight. I want to ask how this came about. Go back with me to the book of John. So we've got this picture, and let's just set the scene a little bit more. You've got this fisherman's house, because that's what Simon was. You've got Andrew. Who was Andrew? It's his brother. Who were James and John? Yeah, they were brothers, but they were fishing partners. They were involved in the same trade. So they're all in this house. And have you ever been in a house where someone is in the house who's sick? And you just feel like you are intruding, don't you? You know, they're trying to be gracious hosts, but the whole time you're like, I shouldn't be here. I just need to go. You know, they're trying to feed you. They're trying to give you something to drink. So I shouldn't be here. I should just go. I don't want to put anything on you. Well, into this house comes, and there's just a stress. Besides being worried about the loved one, there's just that level of stress that's in there. So they get the chance to have Jesus in their house, and what do immediately? Tell him about Peter's mother-in-law. But let's look to see how this came about. Look at John chapter 1. I love this point. John chapter 1. Start with verse 40. One of the two who heard John speak and followed him was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. Okay, so now we're talking about Andrew. He first found his own brother Simon and said to him, We have found the Messiah, which is translated the Christ. And he brought him to Jesus. Now when Jesus looked at him, he said, You are Simon the son of Jonah. You shall be called Cephas, which is translated a stone. So he first found his own brother Simon and said to him, We have found the Messiah. What's the first thing that Andrew thought of? Or who was the first one that Andrew thought of? He thought of his own brother, didn't he? And he thought, To whom can I bring this message of salvation? I found the Messiah, but his first reaction was, I found the Messiah, I've got to keep him to myself. That's not what it was. What was his first reaction? I've got to tell somebody, and who better to tell than his own brother? Now, the first link to what Jesus does to Peter's mother-in-law doesn't start with Peter, doesn't start with his mother-in-law, doesn't start with the synagogue. Where does it start? It starts with Andrew, doesn't it? Andrew sought his brother, and he spoke to him concerning the Messiah, then brought him to Jesus, and Jesus accepted this new recruit. And so Peter became a follower of Christ, and he was on the right side. I want you to think with me about the difference of what Andrew did for Simon, the difference that that made in their family life. I know they're both grown men on this occasion by this time, but do you think that made a difference in that home? Do you think it made a difference for their family gatherings when they were all, or many of them anyway, were followers of Jesus? You think that upped the fellowship in that home? Do you think it made things just a little bit more special that you had more than one person in that house being a follower of Jesus Christ? Absolutely. Now, that's right, at least two. Whose responsibility ultimately is it in the home for that home to know about Jesus? Father, isn't it? Now the mother has a responsibility obviously as well. But as the head of the house, whose ultimate responsibility is it for the family to know? Right. Now, we usually think in big terms, and we should. You know, we can win Memphis to Christ. We can win Tennessee to Christ. We can win the United States to Christ. And that's a great, 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 great thing. But far too often we miss the best place to start. And where is it? It's in the home. What would the church in the United States be today if only the children of supposed Christians remained faithful? Would we be shrinking? I mean, if we didn't win another soul except that of our children, and I understand it's up to them. I understand that. But if that's all that happened, where would the church be? Would we have those doom and gloom lessons that we have about how the church is shrinking and how the United States is lagging behind? Where is the best place to start in teaching people about Jesus? Got to be. It's got to be. It is a notable event in our house when each family member decides to follow the Lord. And there are people here that could even speak better to this than I can, because there are people here who are at one time were outside of Christ and your whole family was, but then somebody taught you, you brought it into the home, or somebody brought it into your home. Not only changed your life, but maybe changed your spouse's life, might even change your children's lives. And what difference did that make in the home? Yeah. There's another link. You go back to John and chapter 1, verse 40. One of the two who heard John, of course, Andrew, he told his brother, look at verse 43. The following day, Jesus wanted to go to Galilee and found Philip and said to them, "Follow me." Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found the Messiah." And it goes on from there. But who else is in this house, in Peter's house? We have said Andrew, Simon. Who else is there? James and John are there. I'm going back to Luke now. What's that? Wife and mother-in-law are also there. And so James and John had this fellowship with Andrew and Peter even before they became Christians, because they had that same kindred job, right? But do you think that all of them following Jesus made a difference in their relationship? Yeah. Not only are they spending their work time together, as we've seen previously, but now what are they doing? They're spending their off time together. And not only that, go back to Luke chapter 4. Verse 38, now he arose from the synagogue and entered Simon's house, but Simon's wife mother was sick with a high fever. So not only does Peter follow Jesus, but he's getting further instruction from him, isn't he? Goes to the synagogue, listens to him, then he invites him into his home. I want us to notice just that how. How did this come about? And here's the point I want to make, and then we'll go on. We look for the grand, and that's a great way to think. That is a great way to think. But we're going to see the difference this one little house made in this whole town on this day, all because Andrew went and told his brother. And I don't know that I can point, or you can point, to one pivotal point like this in your own life, but there was one, and there may have been multiple. But you think of the things that have happened to get you where you are today. We need to be grateful for those things, don't we? But not just grateful and think, whew, I'm glad I'm saved. But what should that motivate us to do? Be that pivotal point in somebody else's life. Because it changes everything, doesn't it? So this is how. And then notice the immediate effect. The first effect when grace entered this house of Peter is that it led the family to prayer. It led the family to prayer. It led the family at least to request Jesus to do something about it. You know, sometimes in our lives, the only thing we can really do with our affliction is tell our Father about it. That's all that can be done. Nobody else can help me. The situation is what it is. I don't know what to do, but there's always something to do. And what is that? Tell my Father about it. Pray to Him about it. Do you have any trouble in your home? Any sickness? Any distress in your home? Tell the Lord about it. Had Andrew not accepted and then told Peter, and had Peter not accepted, there wouldn't be any true prayer in that house. Talking to the Lord. I know a young lady, and I know her through our girls, one of her friends. She was, without mentioning her name, if you need to correct me, go ahead and correct me. A young girl from Alabama. I want to say she was about junior high or maybe a freshman in high school. She had been attending worship service with some of Corinne's friends, and she heard the gospel, and she obeyed the gospel with great fervor. She was so excited. But her parents were not Christians and did not like what she had done. And they told her, you cannot attend the services anymore. She's under the rule of her family. They told her, you cannot attend church services down there. You did this without our permission, you're done. You can't go there anymore. So she obeyed the gospel, couldn't go to worship, couldn't be led in prayer by the head of that family. Sad, isn't it? But because Andrew accepted and told Peter, and because Peter accepted and invited the Lord to his house, they were able to talk directly to Jesus and make this request known. All because Andrew said, hey, Peter, we found him, the one we've been looking for. The second effect, prayer, was healing. He gave her a touch, lifted up the sick woman, she was healed. And then what is the first thing she does when she gets up? I love this and do not miss it. She served. What should be our response, number one, to the grace of Jesus Christ and the gift of Jesus on the cross? What should be our natural response? I've got to do something. I can't just sit here based upon what I know and what was done for me. I can't just sit here and do nothing. It should drive us to service. Yet oftentimes, well, look, I'm going to get to that point. Stay right there. When grace comes home, the one who had been the object of the most anxiety becomes the happiest of them all. Have you ever seen a new convert when they come up out of that water? Hey, let's go teach my family. Let's go down to the inner city. Let's teach all them too. Let's go to the drug dealer on the corner. He needs to hear the gospel too. But what do? Settle down a little bit. Wait just a little bit. That ought never to be, should it? We ought to continue to be excited. Note the rest of them. They all had a heavy heart. Now they're rejoicing. We got to go on one more point from this. Notice the effect of other. Andrew to Peter, then to Peter's wife, to her mother. And man, this is awesome. And I love Mark's description of it in Mark chapter 1. I don't know who the first one. This happened inside Peter's home, that she was cured. I don't know who told whom about it. Maybe it was one of the servants. But what ends up happening? Look at verse 33. Well, verse 32. At that evening, when the sun had set, they brought to him all who were sick and those who were demon-possessed. And then verse 33. And the whole city was gathered together at the door. How much of the city? You don't necessarily have to stand on a corner announcing your religion. What do you have to do? You live it each day. The story went out throughout the entire town. I like to think about that poor man on a crutch hobbling to him. Other people carrying their loved ones to him. And Peter's house became a hospital for the sick. This ordinary house of a fisherman becomes the center of the whole world for that town. Why? Because Andrew went and found Peter, and Peter came to Christ. In his household. And I'll end with this, but I know hopefully you've got the point I'm trying to make from this. If just our house lives for Jesus, can it make a difference in our home, on our street, in our town? Yeah. That's a place to start, isn't it? All right, there are handouts out there for next week. So make sure you get one of those, and Lord willing, we'll discuss that next week. What are we talking about next week? Oh, Jesus chooses his 12 apostles. That's pretty good, isn't it?